What's up, everybody? My name is Jordan Farmer, and this uncommon conversation is with none other than Krista Hilton, the host of the Drunk Politics podcast, as well as owner at the Drunk Republic. She's a very interesting and unorthodox Christian. She has many interesting opinions on many interesting topics, and I think she is one of the sober voices out there that is worth exploring, worth listening to, worth considering, and I'm very excited personally to see what she's going to do over the next few years. I think she's just scratching the surface of what she could be doing, and she's doing quite a lot as it is. I hope you genuinely enjoy this conversation. The purpose of these conversations is just to facilitate conversation, to show people that the standard political back and forth that we always have to deal with and suffer through is not the only way for it to be done. There are many, many, many people out there who have amazing and wonderful things to contribute to the conversation, and only through this ongoing dialogue can we actually solve problems, learn how to get along, and reverse the negative trends that our society is currently going through. So I'd encourage you to check out this podcast, check out all of her material, and share this with as many people as you possibly can. I'm not saying that this is going to be the greatest conversation in the history of all time, but what I would like to say is I think it's a great example of how people can establish common sense, straightforward goals, introduce themselves with, we didn't really know much of anything about each other prior to this, and yet we can just hop right into it and have a pretty decent political conversation. And, talk about very interesting, deep topics, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Anyways, have a wonderful day. God bless you all. Let's get it done. Lastly, before I forget, this was at the end of a very long work day for me. I picked horrible lighting. I picked a horrible way to do all this stuff. And so I promise you in the future, we'll have a totally different scenario when it comes to the lighting and how tired I am and whether or not you can see my eyes. Now, the main focus of this podcast is what she has to say, which I think is very good. But when you do see me, I just apologize for the fact that I look like I am possessed by a caveman demon. Have a great one, y'all. Oh, and lastly, all the links will be in the description down below. Please like and subscribe. Let's blow this stuff up, man. Let's make it happen.
I ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside them. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the word really coming?
Out of respect for the Drunk Politics podcast, I usually don't have alcohol in the house. We just so happen to have some, so I will be having this in the back.
Yay! Actually, my drink's over here, so let me grab that. Ugh.
Sweet. Alrighty, so I'll just explain sort of who I am and what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Mostly just a dude, just a regular guy. I was a blue-collar worker, car detailer a few years ago, security guard and warehouse worker before that, and my mom's very educated, and my grandpa was a pastor, so we had a certain amount of high-level performance, whatever you want to call it, in the family. But I was just doing my thing, learning about politics, and then around 2018, my understanding became significant enough to where I had things to add to the conversation, and so I decided to jump in. And I mostly focus on policy. That's sort of my Northern Star, policy and conversation, because I think those are the two keys to us actually getting things done. I've been all over the political spectrum. I grew up Republican and voted Libertarian in 2012 and 2016 in the general election. But I voted for Bernie in the 2016 primaries because I thought he was a better choice over Hillary. And in California, you can just switch and go vote in those primaries. So I did to shift things in that direction. It didn't end up working, but nonetheless, it was it shows something about my flexibility politically. And then in 2020, I voted for Trump, and I would have voted for Trump in 2016. But again, we're in California, so it didn't really matter. And so I was sort of playing the long game. If you hit 5% as a third party in the general election, you get into the debates the next time around. So that's why I was going that way. But voted for Trump in 2020 and had to spend 4 years defending myself, and everything that I believed, and that's only made me better for it. And yeah, so now I'm focused on trying to. I think the Democrats are already in a death spiral, but I do think if we can move past party politics and focus on what's best for the American people with a true American vision, that's our best way forward. And so that's sort of my North Star and what I'm going for. I call myself a moderate, but at this stage, I'm completely, almost exclusively an ally of the right and right-wing politicians, just because I think left-wing politicians have gone off the deep end in terms of actually representing the people in any way whatsoever. So that's where I'm at politically. And I wanted to reach out to you just because I thought you seemed very bright. You had a lot of interesting topics. And when I looked into your podcast, you had some really interesting things to say about your faith and your Christianity. So I want to get into that in a little bit. Okay. But for now, I'm very curious about your political journey and sort of where you see yourself now.
Okay. I am really pretty moderate. I'm a registered libertarian. I've been throughout the political spectrum too. I've never really been a liberal, but I've, understood where they are coming from in some areas. I think it's cute. I think it's like it's a nice pipe dream, but it's not really the way the world works. So, and I read the whole CARES Act because I was working with business owners when COVID hit, and I like policy also. But I was like, what the fuck are they stuffing in this bill? And what is it really? And is it the right thing for my clients to take loans? Is the government going to own them? And so I read that. And then I just started watching all the hypocrisy and the media being lying, because I started finally watching press conferences, things like that. And I just couldn't believe how much we were being lied to. So my sister and I were sitting on the couch one day in her house, and I was there because we fled Portland for a few. And we were watching Drunk History. And then we were like, what if we started a podcast that was kind of a play on words, but we could explain things, and it would be a play on how politicians act wasted. That's how toddler they are. They act like drunk toddlers. So
That's pretty accurate, and almost, and it's actually quite true. I'm sure there's lots of there are not so secret alcoholics amongst our Congress, so that's kind of that's pretty good. Yeah, I thought it was awesome. I think it's a cool concept. I love the drunk history and the stories, and you definitely bring a lot of value. So I thought that was really cool. What's your perspective on the Trump years now that we're kind of past and before potentially them?
I thought Obama was a disaster. I didn't really have much of an opinion on Trump going into the 2016 election. I just knew that I would rather die than vote for Hillary. So I didn't actually vote at all. I voted for everything but the presidential race in 2016 because I just was like, frickin' Donald Trump and Hillary, these are my fucking choices. And so I just didn't fill anyone in because I just couldn't. And so, but I did make a bet with my boyfriend I was seeing at the time. It was like, I went over there to watch the results or whatever. And I was like, Trump's going to fucking win. And he's like, no, he's not. I was like, yeah, he fucking is. He's going to win. Everyone thinks like, oh, Hillary's a shoo-in, but I think that's just the story we're being told. And he's like, fuck that. Like, no, he's not. And he voted for Trump. So it wasn't like, he's like, I don't want to do it. He's like, I just don't think it's realistic. And sure enough, he did. And so I got to rub that in his face for the rest of the time that we were dating, which wasn't very long, but whatever. And,
That's another talk.
Yeah. So anyway, everything seemed to be fine. Like, we hadn't started any needless wars. Our economy was growing. He was just the right amount of controversy. His tweets were hilarious. And so I just was like, I don't have a problem with this guy. Like, finally we have somebody that's running that's like leading, that leads like it's a business, because it is in fact a corporation. So it made sense to me. And so in 2020, I did vote for Trump. But Joe Biden has no cognitive ability, so there wasn't also really a choice.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
So I like Trump, don't get me wrong. I think he has some things to hide. And I think that he's not like the savior that people want him to be. But I think that's okay. You know, it's whatever. I don't really care what kind of person he is, to be quite honest, in his personal life, whatsoever, because that has no impact on me. So I don't give a fuck. That's that.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I feel very much the same way. Yeah, Trump did a lot of good, and for the most part, what people thought was controversial about him was more so how the traditional institutions reacted to him. Because as I was following his presidency, sort of decision by decision, policy by policy, it just seemed like he was sort of like, you know, I followed him in the very beginning. He had tons and tons of meetings with executives and businesses to sort of see how they could approach the economy. And but he was all about gathering info and seeing the different sides and then coming to a judgment. And every time he would take an action and move forward on something, I would sort of look into it, think about the various sides, and sort of see how that was the logical choice. And it just seemed like we are so not used to competent leadership and like people that think through things, especially while on the job, especially once they have more information. Like we're always sort of condemning the foreign policy choices of various presidents, but we all know they learn a bunch of stuff once they get into office that changes the game. That doesn't in any way change the fact that, yeah, Trump was the first guy in a long time to not start any new wars, to actually backtrack and you know, pull down on what we were doing. Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize 2 months into his presidency, and he took us from
why would you even
to
get that?
7, like six simultaneously, and then one. Like we had a bunch of different engagements. So he was the opposite. All right. We'll go for another like 34 minutes or so. Okay. We'll keep it a little short. So what has been your journey with your faith, if you don't mind going into that and explaining a little bit?
Sure. I grew up a born again Christian. One side of my family is all Christian, the other side's Catholic. Accepted Jesus into my heart when I was like 11, maybe 10-ish. I went to Christian school until I was in 8th grade. And I was very involved in my high school youth group. I was a youth leader. There are some things that always seemed a little bit off to me. Like non-explanations for things, just this isn't right and don't do this. And I'm the type of person that wants to know why, and I want to understand it. And so, I mean, I have read the Bible, and I would call myself a Christian, but I would say that I'm a very untraditional Christian in the sense that I just think that we don't have all the answers. And I think that we look to pastors and people too much for them to tell us the answers. And we put way too much faith in what other humans have to say about it. I think that the Council of Nicea wasn't exactly what we thought it was. And I think that certain books were left out of the Bible on purpose because they were trying to block us from like our power within ourselves that God gave us. And so I think that there's a narrative out there that suggests that things like yoga and like all of the things and like crystals and things that came from maybe Hinduism or whatever are demonic. And I think that that's silly, because maybe those ancient religions knew something that we didn't. And like, just because they put it in a godly way doesn't mean that we have to. And that doesn't mean that that's not what God intended for it, right? And that just because one person uses it to do one thing doesn't mean it actually does anything. So like with crystals and stuff, they've been proven to put off different vibrations for things. And vibrations is basically like what this world, I mean, it's physics, right? Science. And I think that if we believe that God is all powerful enough to make something so complex, then we have to pay attention to that. And I think that it's silly to like demons live in crystals. That makes no sense to me. And doing yoga, summoning the devil, like that also makes no sense to me. There's multiple health benefits to practicing these certain things. And that doesn't mean that we have to attach another God to it. That means that, are we missing a bigger picture? Should we actually be closer to God than what we are? And why would those people back then want us not to be closer to God, right? Things like accessing your pineal gland, that actually can heal a lot of stuff that medicine has to heal. And so why are we putting so much faith in something that's man-made and dissing this like amazing piece of our body that God gave us? We're not saying that we're healing ourselves. That piece of my brain could be healing myself, but God put that piece of brain in there for a purpose. And if we're not using it for a purpose, we're not saying like, ooh, that we're accessing it and like, oh my gosh, the universe is healing us. Like, that's fucking dumb, right? We can have faith and also believe that God is powerful enough to give us those things. And the real question is, has this been a giant psyop since the day of its inception, just like we're seeing here? Or have we been put to sleep on purpose? And was the devil behind that? And so those are the questions that I'm kind of grappling with in my own faith and my own world right now, because I'm just watching how Christians are acting at this point in time, and how many of them just seem like they're sleepwalking, and then they regurgitate the same freaking information. And it's like, how do you even know what that person meant in the Bible? And how do you know that it has been translated correctly? And why do we really know why some of those books were left out? Some of them it's obvious, right? But some of them actually talk about the pineal gland, and some of them talk about some of the like deeper spiritual things that have been erased from our Christian history as Eastern religion or whatever. But really, if you sat there in meditation, but it's actually prayer, and you're talking to God and you're accessing that part of your brain that He gave you, and your purpose is to kind of like, pray for reals, what more glorious things could come out of your life that you're axing out and calling the devil? And so I don't know. It just, the more science I look into behind it, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, to me, that's demonic, like dumb interpretation of all of these things are, that was 2,000 years ago, before they knew how to attach science to it. Right. And so if we know that our bodies can do that naturally, then that means that God did that. And who are we to tell God that He did not create something for a purpose? Right? Just because the devil's handiwork might have taken it over, why do you think that is? Right? So we didn't have as good of access to God. So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. You're obviously exploring and questioning, and that's a great place to be. That's, you never want to get caught into a mental prison. You always want to be trying to sort of question and get around the bar, so to speak. It's really interesting because you talked about a few things like the crystals and stuff like that. Just on the physics sort of level of things, as you were mentioning, like we have electricity in our brain. That's our thoughts. That's like everything. And I went to with my we just celebrated 6 years anniversary with my significant other. We went to a metaphysical shop, and I held like this one little rock. It was like in the shape of like the Washington Monument, a little green marble thing. Held it up against this spot, and I could feel it pulling something up to the front and like changing what was happening in there. And in terms of, I'm going to hop around a little bit, but it's all sort of related. In terms of establishing the precedent that the church that was in charge of the Council of Nicea and get everything sort of the collection of forces, I should say, around that, they kept the actual truth of the words of the Bible from the everyday people by keeping them illiterate. So it makes sense why they would go beyond just that sort of base level step. So they already had the motivation. It's already proven that they were trying to keep the people blind. So it's not a stretch to say that this might have happened. And we are both literally and in every sense emerging up out of Mother Nature and reaching up towards Father God. So there's the sort of the intellect, the conceptual ideal being judged by the Father, and we're reaching up and we can sort of sense the gap between us and the Almighty. But we're coming from the sinful nature, Mother Nature. We were creatures. We have a nature, a biological nature that's true over time. And all of those tools that we're co-evolved to use, because our system is very clearly developed to handle and to do things with these substances that are specific. It's a giant rabbit hole to jump into in terms of psychedelics. I'll speak to my own experience with psilocybin mushrooms. I actually helped cure my depression because the ego death, or the lack of attachment to your previous identity that's associated with that, was the source of my depression. And so when I was able to let go of my past, it helped me, just have much more vibrancy and mental health. And that's, that's a chemical thing and totally different than, any kind of traditional medicine or psychology or anything like that. And that's power. If you could cure your depression, cure your mental illness, well, now you're a formidable person. Whereas before you're compromised, you're having an issue. So I definitely think that there's that whole side to sort of the maternal or the female spirituality and sort of the biology of it and the chemicals of it that all has been sort of buried and attacked and demonized and intentionally. Definitely. So it's all about the intellect and the judgment and the rigid ideology, but it's not anything about sort of exploring or truth or possibility or the unknowns or the questions. And so I think it's a huge side of things we need to look into. And everything about like yoga is about, hypothetically, like loosening and getting the body properly physically integrated. But it takes you to a different level when you no longer have any physical aches and pains. It's like a sensory deprivation take. You're removing stimulus that's interrupting a signal. And typically when people get to sort of the ultimate stage in yoga, they experience, unlocking, an experience with God, something psychedelic, something of that sort. They've talked about that quite a bit. So it makes sense that you align your biology the right way. You can actually connect to God. And I do believe there's good and bad in all of this, because there's good and bad in all of us. So if you're not in the right place, you can totally be taken in the wrong direction by these substances or by exploring any of this stuff. Like with marijuana, it makes you more sensitive, just sort of on a neurological level. And so if you're in a negative or even a neutral headspace and something negative comes up, it's going to accentuate that and just create a magnified effect. So if you're paranoid or whatever, that will be your experience. if you're in a positive mindset and then you go into it, well, then you're going to have an exaggerated version of that. And that's more so what people like to enjoy out of that substance. So hang on, let me
right.
check the time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that needs to be unlocked and explored. And there's no question that we've been put to sleep in a number of ways. I believe like television and the internet now,
yeah.
we all have TVs following us 24/7. These are just little TVs. We forget about that.
Yep.
They're involved in controlling us, and they're involved in more so. The best way to control someone is to never expose them to an alternative. If you as an example, MSNBC, when they would list all of the polling in the 2020 Democratic primaries, they wouldn't even list Andrew Yang. Yep. Even though he was polling at 11%, and Kamala was at 0.1%, and she would be put on there. Elizabeth Warren was put on there, but Andrew Yang was cut off. So people wouldn't even think of him as a contender, even though he had a third of the support Joe Biden did organically built from scratch, which is way more impressive, because the people that voted for Joe Biden, for the most part, I believe, were told by the media that Joe Biden had the best chance of winning. And so they just supported him for that reason. I think it really was as simple as that, because it was him or Bernie. And then everyone's like, well, Bernie's too much of a weirdo socialist to ever get elected. Whereas the truth is he's not controlled as much as the others are. So they want to cut him out. Now, would Bernie make a great president? I don't think so.
No,
on the foreign policy and the
point.
economic side. Yeah. But on the foreign policy and economic side, he would be horrible. But on the basic integrity and caring about, Americans, I think he would do better and have a better shot of winning. But
at least he can articulate himself.
Who? Sorry, what was it?
I said at least he can articulate himself. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although it's getting slower and easier to mimic him. It's
hard. I did a video the other day where I was like lip syncing him on TikTok or wherever the hell it was, Instagram. I don't know. And there was a lot it takes. Like it's like mumbling. It's basically mumbling. I'm basically mumbling right now. It's hard.
You just have to be able to say percent right.
Right.
The top 1/10 of 1%, like that, the percent, that's 1%. The part you really got to get right. Percent. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy. I think I really liked when he went on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think he made, sort of showed a more intellectual, well thought out side of himself.
Yeah.
But he's still, first off, so in the 2016 primaries is very interesting. He spent 6 months, maybe 8 months, telling us how corrupt Hillary Clinton was, and telling how she was taking, money from banks, $250,000 speech fees for months and months. And then he turns around and says, all right, now support her. I'm giving her my official endorsement. And I'm like, how do you do that? How do you, you could at least just say, I think she's better than Trump, and then leave it at that. But he actually supported her. And once he did that, I was like, okay, he doesn't have the backbone to be able to do it. So, yeah. Anywho, which gets to DeSantis and Trump. They recently had a somewhat substantive little debacle, because DeSantis said, I don't believe it's your business whether or not I'm boosted or anything like that. And Trump out and out said he's gotten the booster, and he got some boost for it. And Trump said that DeSantis showed a lack of guts, or a lack of gusto, or whatever you want to call it, machismo, in not just saying it outright and playing that game. What do you think about that? And what do you think about that as it relates to being a leader?
I think who gives a fuck? I like DeSantis's answer, because it's no one's business. We shouldn't know whether the politicians are boosted, or who gives a shit. I don't want to tell you, I don't think that I need to tell everybody my medical choices, just like I don't really give a fuck about yours. And that's the thing. It needs to be a choice, super. And I think that DeSantis has made that response was good, because it has made him clear about how it should be your choice. Look,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It should be your choice. You get it or don't get it. I don't care. And that needs to be like, he's showing that's his real opinion, right? By not answering. And I think that Trump, I'm really disappointed with how he's handled the vaccine narrative. And like, okay, fine. Tell everybody you got boosted, but also like you've been really kind of wishy-washy about things. He's been, advocating for the vaccine because he helped bring it to market. Okay, that's going to make you look like a fucking murderer at some point if this ends up not going well and the conspiracy theorists end up being correct. So maybe don't champion it. And if it's just the manufacturing part that you're proud of, make sure you differentiate. Did he approve us getting ingredients or the Pfizer getting ingredients from China? Hey, Trump, if I were to ever interview him, I would flat out ask him. This is a question that we need to know. When you made this deal, which was the deal of all deals, and it got to market the fastest ever and blah, 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 from a business standpoint, more fucking power to you. You gave the people what they wanted, whether it's safe or not. Who really cares? He delivered, and it is up to us to have discretion whether we take that delivery or not. It's there. People wanted it. He made it happen. On that sense, I would brag about it too. But all of the things, it's like, are you that tone deaf and have no idea what's going on, like in the world with all these side effects and stuff? Like, you need to differentiate yourself. Did you approve them manufacturing outside of the United States, first of all? And do you know about the ingredients they're getting from places like China? And was that okay with you? And what I do find interesting, though, is that he pushed like Moderna and stuff. And I don't think that Pfizer's got approved until after he was ready to leave office. And Pfizer's shot is the one that this administration currently is pushing. So I would like to know the whole story behind that, because Pfizer's the one that is getting a lot of their ingredients from China. There's like some certain parts of it. And it's like, okay, well, and we even called today. My sister had an at-home COVID test and we looked at it and it was like made in the People's Republic of Korea or whatever it's called. And we were like, wait, what? Or Democratic Republic of Korea. Okay. Manufactured in South Korea. Why on the fucking face of the planet are we buying things like, why in the midst of all this are we manufacturing overseas still? What is happening right now? And she's like, well, the tests are made and then they're packaged and they're sent here and they're sold by us. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not that South Korea is not trustworthy, but like, that's not the point. The point is we're buying masks from China made in a dirty fucking factory. Like, how does any of this make sense? We're living like in an upside down world. I can't make sense of it. So that's my opinion on the Trump DeSantis thing.
That's a
back into a circle.
Yeah, that's a brilliant angle on it. I didn't even know or think about that, but I knew ahead of time, and it's been a longstanding issue that we have trade and supply chains overseas. Most of our, I think 70 to 90% of our pharmaceutical based ingredients are made in China. So it would make sense why that would be the case. I just hadn't even thought about like China's actually making these vaccines that are, responding. That's a whole different thing. Anyways, the Trump DeSantis thing, I think you highlighted it perfectly. And what I see in it is this. Trump had guts, and guts is better than being corrupt, but you need guts and sophistication. And Trump lacked that second part, and DeSantis has it. It is a next level position to say, it's not anyone's business what I'm choosing with my medical stuff versus, well, I got boosted. It was the best booster ever. No boosters have ever been as boosty as my boosted boosters. Like that's not the way you want to go with it. It was good. I like the guts. I like the spine of Trump, but we need a more sophisticated person. And DeSantis showed flexible sophistication. He was pro lockdown when we had no idea what we were dealing with. And once we had the data and he realized what it was, he protected the vulnerable classes and let everyone else get back to normal life, which was like July 2020. And he showed and showed strong leadership. It was against the grain. He got no credit for it from anybody. Most Republicans were kind of barely paying attention. Everyone in Florida doesn't know what they missed. And everyone outside of Florida, especially like me here in California, I know exactly what happened. You know, massive drug issues, massive suicide, massive increase in homelessness, massive shutdowns of small businesses, and a whole generation of workers that lost 18 months of doing anything. And more and more and more. Like we don't even know the full magnitude. That's not even including the disease and the other things. So I think that highlights exactly why in 2024 we really need to push hard for DeSantis over Trump, because I think it shows he has all the good that Trump has with almost none of the bad, and that is the Republican Party. And I think that was the genius of Trump in a way. He maxed out the substance, made himself like the most ugly person possible, so that once the Republicans come back behind him, the substance is taken care of, and they all look like, you know, statesmen, you know, champions, you know, by comparison. And it's important to be able to just say what you have to say. I don't know if you were taught this, but I was taught, if you have nothing nice to say nothing at all.
Don't say anything at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
The truth is not always nice.
No.
So if you believe in that, that means that you will sacrifice truth to being nice. And that is one of the two major issues we have in our society right now. I would say the cult of niceness, the religion of niceness, which is the apex is the LGBTQ, blah, 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 and all that stuff. I call it the losers coalition, because it's all about it's like, and here's the thing, I'm an overweight guy. So like, I'll put myself in the fat category real quick. The overweight, unhealthy people are the losers as compared to the fit, healthy people. And so it's about advocating for them. If you think that Black people have suffered and are the losers as, you know, compared to the white people, it's about advocating for them. And that's the central thread throughout all of this. It's all about, you know, seeming like you're advocating for the underdog, but we all know the Democrat leadership is all, I think Democrat people are compassionate, and the party is almost all wolves taking advantage of those compassionate sheep.
I would agree with that.
So, well, I think you did an excellent job of sort of summarizing what you're doing. What do you have going on in the future? What are your plans over the next 6 to 8 months, or 6 months to a year, we'll say? And
So we started a brand called Drunk Republic, and we have a line of t-shirts, but we're going to start adding different types of products. We have 4 or 5, we're negotiating 5 different podcasts that are going to come on underneath Drunk Republic. And so that's pretty fun. And we are going to launch a membership with an NFT attached to it. So So that's kind of fun. So we'll be launching that soon and give you more details. But we're going to do that, and eventually, after that all takes place, we're going to have a whiskey brand first, and then we're going to do vodka and tequila. So
nice.
Yeah. So that's where we're at right now.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to trying some. I'm a whiskey man myself, so I'll be going for that.
Same.
Well, excellent. Well, I think this is a great place to call it. Thank you so much for coming on here. It was a great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was wonderful to have you on, and we'll definitely have to do it again sometime in the future. Yep. You have a wonderful night.
You too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside him. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the world really coming to? What you think the people gonna do? Everybody's so oblivious, open your eyes, that shit right in front of you.